Um, Thank you, Liz. And we are recording this session, and you will get the link to it once it is posted on our ANJAC YouTube channel, ANJAC Views. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use your chat feature, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, and we will address those questions to our speakers this evening. Also, remember, we have a lot of people with us this evening, and it is a meeting format. So when you enter the room, you have been muted. Please keep yourself muted throughout the presentation so that we don't have any background noise. That would be greatly appreciated. So we're going to start today's session off with a couple of questions to find out exactly who is with us this evening. So Liz, if you can run the first poll. The first question is simply, what is your affiliation? And if you fit under more than one category, you can choose more than one answer for this question. Okay, the votes are coming in. Give it a couple more minutes and allow people to choose their appropriate answer. Okay, so this evening, it looks like we have majority of environmental commissioners, about 87%. Next category, we have other local board members, open space, green team, etc., coming in at 37. And then we have a lot of people who are just simply interested. That's great. Okay. And our next poll question. Why is my slide not going forward? Oops, see, hold on. Poll question number 2, okay. So Liz, if you can do the second question. Our second question is that we would like to know what type of community do you live in? Either urban, suburban, or rural. For some reason, I can't see the answers. I saw the first, there we go. All right, we got about 85% of people voted, 90, getting close to 90, so I can close it. So it looks like most people are suburban, followed by rural. So that will help our presenters in showing various maps this evening. That's great. Okay, and then our last question, my slide will advance for me, is can you what statement best fits you so we can get an understanding of what your experience is with using the New Jersey Conservation Blueprint map? And we got about 80, about close to 80, almost 87% voted. And there, it looks like majority of people really don't have any idea what New Jersey Conservation Blueprint mapping is. So you have a lot of teaching to do tonight, John and Eric. All right. So this evening, our panelists for tonight's session does include Dr. John Hassey and Eric Olson. Eric worked for the Nature Conservancy since 2006. He currently serves as Director of Lands and Rivers. In his role, he manages a team for land protection, river restoration, habitat connectivity, land management, and land and river policy for the New Jersey chapter. Eric has extensive experience coordinating community outreach and leading large-scale land and water partnership projects like the New Jersey Conservation Blueprint and the Common Waters Partnership. He has led a variety of forest and freshwater conservation projects, including conservation planning, land protection, stewardship, dam removal, and habitat connectivity. Eric received his BA in English with a minor in environmental studies from Duke University, has an AA in liberal arts from Sussex County Community College. He's active in his community, sitting on the Andover Township Land Use Board and Environmental Commission, and the founder and chair of Sustainable Andover, which has received the Sustainable Jersey certification. Dr. John Hassey is a professor of geology and the director of the Geospatial Research Lab in the Department of Geography, Planning, and Sustainability at Rowan University. John holds a master's degree in urban planning and a master's and PhD in geography from Rutgers University. Dr. Hassey's research interests focused on geography and the interface of land use, environmental planning, and spatial analysis. He's been conducting an ongoing multi-decade analysis of urbanization and open space loss in New Jersey and studies the environmental impacts of future development build-out. Dr. Hassey established the award-winning New Jersey Map Platform, an online interactive atlas of New Jersey's environmental data. The New Jersey Map Platform hosts a variety of map themes depicting the state's changing environment, inventory of natural resources, and community assets, and supports dozens of partners in open space protection and farmland preservation through the Conservation Blueprint Mapping Tool. John aims to leverage the New Jersey Map geospatial tools for visualizing New Jersey's bioregional and land systems in support of addressing climate change and adaptation, which he considers the most critical challenge of our generation. Okay, and with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and hand over the program to Eric and John, and I believe John is going to start us off.
Well, thank you very much, Randy. I'm very happy to be here, as I know Eric is as well. And this is probably the largest group that we have presented to the Conservation Blueprint. And so in some ways, the whole Zoom reality that we're in has been really a pain, and it's been really tragic time. In other ways, it's opened up new possibilities for us to communicate these very important things about environment and conservation and environmental protection and so forth. And so we're going to take advantage of the positive parts of this. And for our presentation, we're able to reach more people doing it through Zoom like this. So this is, I'm very, very happy to be here. And hopefully this is maybe the first of a series of workshops in how to use these mapping tools, because there's a lot of layers to it, and that's pun intended, right? A lot of layers to this mapping. But thank you very much for the invitation. And let me start out first by talking about the difference between NJMAP and the Conservation Blueprint. That's often a question that I'm first asked. So let me just clarify that right from the beginning. NJMAP is our mapping platform. Okay, we have been working on this for about 10 years, and we do online mapping. It's part of geography. I'm a geography professor. We use it for communicating, for teaching, and we have some special tools that we've developed that really make NJMAP be unique from some other mapping that you might use. And then the Conservation Blueprint uses NJMAP platform, and so it's kind of like, if we think about the the Constitution has 27 amendments. Well, the first 10 of the Bill of Rights. The Conservation Blueprint is kind of like our Bill of Rights. It's the main thing that we've really been focusing on in the last 5 or 6 years. And the reason why it has risen to the top is because it's not just mapping that is being done at a university. It's a collaboration of many different people and different stakeholders. And that's why I'm very, very happy to have Eric Olson from the Nature Conservancy be a co-presenter tonight. Eric and I have been working quite closely together now on the Blueprint project for 5 or 6 years. And it's very, very rewarding as a professor and an academic to be able to be engaged in real activities that make a difference in New Jersey. At least we hope that they do. And it's great exposure for my students who are building the platform to be engaged with conservation and environmental protection and so forth in a very, very real way. So, so the Conservation Blueprint uses NJMAP, but the Conservation Blueprint is a bigger process. It's not just the maps that we're going to show, it's all the people involved. The 3 leadership team members are Rowan, we do the actual technical mapping, and then Eric from the Nature Conservancy is a leadership partner on this that kind of helped to brainstorm the idea. And then the New Jersey Conservation Foundation is the 3rd partner in creating the blueprint process. But there are about 24 different steering committee members, anywhere from local organizations to state agencies that are very active in being part of this blueprint process, this conservation blueprint process. Now, Eric's going to talk a little bit about the development of the vision of the conservation blueprint, but just want to be very clear about that. Blueprint yes, they are maps that are on NJMAP, but it's a whole process and a whole group of stakeholders that really make it special. It's not just maps, it's the whole process of this idea of creating a blueprint for the future of where New Jersey is going to be and having everybody work on that common blueprint together. Okay, so when we use the words interchangeably, the different map layers that are, say, technically not blueprint and NJMAP, they work hand in hand. You can go from one to another, and I'm going to show non-blueprint layers, but the blueprint is the process that is really focused on environment and conservation, and some of the other NJMAP layers do other things, but they all work together, and you'll see that hopefully and get a sense of that. So I have a little slide show that I'm going to just use to keep me on target here. So let me bring that up and start sharing my screen. Okay, so hopefully you can see my Google Slides. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this Google Slide link. And what I would ask of you is to actually not open it up so that you can pay attention to the presentation, but just know that you have access to this slideshow. And the slideshow has live links to all the maps that I'm going to show you. Okay, so hopefully the idea is that this Google Slide show will be able to be a real tool for you to not have to take down every note and to listen to everything that I'm saying. Not only is this being recorded, but this Google Slide will have links directly to the maps that you're going to be seeing, at least some of them as well tonight. So how do I do that here? So I'm going to do share, and I am going to paste this in the chat. Hello, okay. Copy the link. All right. And I'm going to paste this in the chat for the Zoom. Okay, so now you have that link, which should open up this exact same Google Slide. If you open it up while we're presenting, it's going to slow you down. So I would suggest that you pay attention and avoid the temptation of trying to copy what I'm doing right now. I think we'll have some time for questions at the end, and we can have a little bit more interaction. I think you'll get most out of it, though, if you try to pay attention. Certainly, you can interrupt me with questions in the text in the chat as we're going, because if I can see that there's a question that's really important, I'll just stop and answer that question as well. But please put your question in the chat if you have a question. Okay, great. So let me go here, and I'm going to keep this not in presentation mode, just so that we don't have the screen changing to presentation mode. So I'm going to just start with putting in context of why we even are talking about the blueprint and why the blueprint was developed. Now, Eric's going to give a little bit of the background about that, but before we were in a situation where this idea that we need some kind of a common platform for the conservation community to be knowing what each other's doing, we really have that need because New Jersey has a very unique and challenging situation with its land situation. New Jersey's 5 million acres, and it is between the largest and the 5th largest metropolitan area in the country, in North America. And so it has challenges with the amount of pressure for development. And so that's where we want to start. That's what I really have been researching in my job as a professor at Rowan. I'm a land use geographer and trying to monitor and understand the dynamics of land use change, which we're seeing in this animated picture here. So we have in NJMAP, this is affiliated with the blueprint. It's not the blueprint. We have the land change viewer. And what you'll be able to do is be able to look at the land change viewer layers in NJ Map by clicking on the links in the Google slide. You'll see if you click on it, and actually if you hold control and click on it, it pops up the URL that I have as a hot link. And if you do that, I'll show you what happens. It's going to bring you right to NJ Map and open up the layers that were turned on when we did that share this link. I'll show you how to create that. Now, you can see because of Zoom and the bandwidth of the video, it's taken a little bit of time to render. So I'm not gonna, you're gonna have to take my word for it. When Zoom is not running, when you open up links to NJ Map, they will render pretty quickly. And what you would see if we had success with that is you would see the urban animations. And these are really compelling maps in that they show change over 30 years. They actually show the change as animation, okay? So it's struggling with the speed because of the zoom here. But so let me just describe to you what you would be seeing. These red blobs that you see in the snapshot there are patches of urbanization that have occurred since 1986. Development in 1986 is colored pink. Everything that was developed after 1986, we color red. And you can see this is in the greater Trenton area. You see all of that red that was developed in less than 30 years. It doesn't maybe look very much on a map like this, but when you sum it up using GIS and using the equipment that we have at Rowan, you get some very significant idea of how land is changing in New Jersey, how it has been changing over the last 30 years. So if we were to take and look at that change, and again, I'm keeping it in this slide mode and not going into presentation mode to try to keep it as efficient as possible, but it makes it smaller. So you're just going to have to bear with it being a little bit smaller. You'll be able to open this up on your own later. But this is showing different time slices of development in New Jersey. So you see those red blobs, we can see the actual pattern of 30 years of development, how it is around the periphery of the suburban areas and along the coast. And then areas like the Pinelands and the Highlands are a lot less consumed by development during that period. But if we could zoom in there, we would see lots of red blobs nonetheless. They're just smaller. So we can see the geography of the development patterns of New Jersey. Now, over this 30 years, which we're seeing different time slices of 5 to 7 years, each of these bars is a different time series. We can see the amount of development that there was in 1986 is about 1.3 million acres. And since 1986, each bar is showing more and more and more land dedicated to urbanization, whereas less and less land, the yellow is agriculture, is dedicated to agriculture, and then loss of forest and loss of wetlands. If we were to sum up, we take a giant broom and sweep together all those red blobs, in 30 years, from 1986 to 2015, New Jersey developed 360,000 acres. That's a third of a million acres that were newly developed out of land that was not previously developed. So it came from agriculture, it came from forest, it came from wetlands primarily. So that's the loss that we have. And so this is, you know, as a land use geographer, that's what I do. I sum up these numbers and I try to make sense out of them and, you know, say that, well, what is 200,000 acres of farmland lost in 30 years? Well, it's 8 Gloucester counties worth of farmland lost, or 1 Gloucester County worth of farmland lost every 8 years, to put it in perspective. How about forest loss? We have 122,000 acres of net forest loss that was lost during this 30-year period. That comes out to 5 Central Parks worth of forest loss every year to development, and wetlands loss as well. Even though there's wetlands regulations, it's really been slowed down. There nonetheless is a significant amount of wetlands loss over this 30-year period, and as well as impervious surface increase, okay? So imagine this, over 30 years on average, we've added 4,353 per year, with that being the equivalent of a parking lot with 1,800 cars added to New Jersey every day. Now, this is really significant. This is the last 30 years. But we must say that over the last 30 years, the rate of development by year has slowed down significantly. And what is this? This is the Great Recession. You see that there? This is between 2007 and 2012, a big drop in the annual development rate. And that means a drop in the loss of farmland. And well, there was a little bit of an increase in the loss of forest land. These negative bars mean loss of land. Positive bars mean increase in land. So that's been a silver lining of the Great Recession, is a slowdown in development, which has helped the conservation process move forward with less development pressure. However, the last year and a half, everything has been turned upside down. There are two major driving forces now. And for somebody that just went to Home Depot last week to get something, a 2x4, which cost $250 last December 2019, now costs $11 or $12 for one 2x4. There is a boom of building, and there is a whole shift from this slowing down of development. And it didn't mean a slowdown of redevelopment. There's actually quite a bit of redevelopment happened in the last few years, but now there is more development that's reflected. I do not have land use data beyond 2015, but we do have some data such as building permits that that indicate a tremendous development boom because of, well, at least related to or synchronous with COVID. The other major changer here is climate change. So those statistics that I mentioned, 360,000 acres of development, we got to be thinking about the future and how that land use change will develop and how much land is actually left for New Jersey to develop. Because there's another story here besides just development and impact on resources. There is the story of New Jersey's incredible conservation process that's happening. And that the blueprint is now really significantly involved in this open space and conservation process. We have one of the most successful farmland preservation programs in the country, and just many, many stories of conservation success stories that Eric's going to touch on as well. So I don't want to steal too much of his thunder. But the idea is that we are doing a lot of conservation, but there's a lot of gaps. There's still 1 million, or probably much less, more like maybe 700,000 acres of land that could be developed or could be preserved. We're not going to preserve all of that, but can we preserve the best of that? Again, Eric's going to mention a few things about that as well. And in fact, that's what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand it off to Eric. I'm going to stop sharing and, oh no, I'm going to keep sharing, Eric, or what am I going to do here?
Yeah, you're going to, if you can just hit the, yeah, continue to share.
I'm gonna just for a second go back to see your face. Hello. And then so Eric's now going to start talking, and I'm going to change the slides for him. And so he's going to give his little bit of an intro. And then after that, we're going to get into some case studies, which I'm sure you're really like chomping at the bit to try to actually see the blueprint in motion. All right, so I'm going to come back to sharing here now. All right,
John, there's a question in chat before we. How does New Jersey compare to other states? Are other states preserving more land or developing like New Jersey?
That's a great question. Now remember, states that are west of Ohio have a lot of they started with a lot of public land to begin with. And so as proportion of state, they blow us away, many of the western states. New Jersey, every square inch of preserved open space was originally private land. It was deeded by the King of England, and every bit of conservation that has happened has been because of the preservation process of New Jersey. So that being said, I think there are certainly other states that have more total acreage preserved. There are other states in the east that have some really great conservation efforts happening. But I think New Jersey has a unique conservation situation that we should be proud of, but we should not feel like it's finished yet. We still got several decades of very important work to do. And I think that's a good segue to have Eric do his thing. So let me start sharing again.
Yeah, good. Hey everyone, it's really nice to be with you tonight. Thanks for joining. As John and Randy mentioned, I work for the Nature Conservancy, and it's been a pleasure working on this project with John. He's a good partner. John, would you mind going into the present mode?
Sure.
Thanks. I don't have any links in mine. There we go. All right, so can you do one click? So why the New Jersey Conservation Blueprint? John has set this wonderful context. New Jersey has done a great job of protecting its valuable natural lands for nature and people. In fact, we are a national leader. One of the top 10 states. We have a conservation history that rivals California, rivals Alaska. It's remarkable. We have about a third of more than 30% of the state is protected open space and farmland. So it's amazing. At the same time, John also portrayed the land use change statistics that really brings New Jersey is projected to be the first state to reach functional build out, which means all land will either be developed or preserved. In reality, New Jersey will never reach that point. Because there will just be some private landowners that do not choose to do either of those two things, preserve or develop. But at some point in time, a heavy proportion of New Jersey's land use will either be preserved or developed. And so it's the estimated time horizon is probably within this next century, not in my lifetime or any people's lifetime on this call, but our children's lifetime. This is a reality. It's nearly impossible to predict an actual build-out window, as John points out, because the way people build across New Jersey has changed greatly, even in the past decades. When I started in the conservation field back in 2005, development trends in Sussex and Warren County, those are the fastest growing counties in the US. In fact, the development trends there, we were gobbling up our farmland, and now those trends have completely changed. We're not losing as much forest land or farmland here, but we all know those trends could change again in the future. Now, protecting land takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money. And with build out likely coming within the next 5 to 6 decades, there is an urgent need to speed up the protection of lands in New Jersey to increase our chances of protecting the most important lands, so that we can assemble a pattern of protected lands that can preserve nature and our cultural resources in the face of a changing climate. There's about 1 million acres available, depending on how you count. John, I think if you can do one more click. And in the limited time that we have available, in the high price of land, if anyone's tried to acquire land in New Jersey in the last 25 years, land is very, very expensive here. Prioritization and collaboration have become an absolute necessity if we're going to make any strides towards conserving a high proportion of what's left. Next slide. So this is what's created the impetus behind the New Jersey Conservation Blueprint project. We looked at this build out window, the conservation community got this urgent horn blow, if you will, and we started gathering to develop this shared living map of priority lands to be protected over the next few decades. Our mission with this work is to accelerate the preservation of the most important remaining natural and cultural land resources that support healthy and vibrant communities in New Jersey. Within this build-out context, the Conservation Blueprint effort gathered the most active land conservation organizations in New Jersey. I'll speak about that in a minute, to build a positive direction for the protection of the best places remaining in the state, to protect the places important for plants and wildlife, for water quality of our state, for our food production and the agricultural economy, and for the health of our cities and communities. And together we want to chart a blueprint of conservation priorities so that the healthy New Jersey for future generations. Next slide. So the Conservation Blueprint would not be possible without the creative, innovative thinking from our dedicated steering committee and advisory committees. Made up of federal, state, and nonprofit organizations, New Jersey's natural, agricultural, and cultural resources are improved daily by these results-focused organizations. And these are the organizations on the screen that are leading this conservation blueprint work. John mentioned the lead project partners, Rowan, Nature Conservancy, and New Jersey Conservation Foundation, but this effort would not be possible without all of the organizations that you see here on the slide, including ANJAC, and I can't thank them enough for setting up this training opportunity. Next. So the conservation blueprint effort builds on a long history of mapping and prioritization for the state. We use the most up-to-date data and analyses on a very sophisticated platform that we'll show you in a moment to identify the most critical. There are 4 key goals that we've got: the most critical agricultural lands, the most critical ecological conservation lands, lands important to protect our water quality in the state of New Jersey, and lands to protect the community green space, or lands that are an important part of our cities, towns, and villages, important for the human habitat and for human health. Next slide. And being that you're the majority of you from environmental commissions, I wanted to speak briefly on what went into the ecological priority model that was developed by a science advisory committee to identify the most ecologically important lands remaining in the state. So there are 4 key components that went into this model. First, water. We all know that water is incredibly important. It's one of the things that polls highest amongst all ecological qualities. So our state's future depends on healthy and plentiful freshwater resources like wetlands, rivers, lakes, streams, and aquifers for drinking water, recreation, and wildlife habitat. Our prioritization for water resources includes key indicators of freshwater health, like headwaters, or where the sources of our streams originate, wetlands, floodplains, groundwater recharge, and impervious surface. The second quality is rare species. New Jersey is home to more than 100 endangered, threatened, and special concern species. Includes mammals, reptiles, amphibians, resident and migratory birds, fish, freshwater mussels, and rare plants. Their existence and their role within the greater ecosystem depends on the protection of their homes and habitats. Our analysis was to identify strongholds for these rare species and natural communities. And we used New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection landscape data and New Jersey Natural Heritage priority sites data to do this analysis. Third, climate change resilience. Climate change related sea level rise, worsening storms, and increasing flooding is already a challenge to New Jersey's natural and human environment. To bolster our resilience, we need to protect natural flood absorbing areas near our cities and towns, and safeguard places where natural communities, wildlife, and plants can adapt and move in the face of climate stresses. The climate change resilience analysis is targeting those places in New Jersey that have the conditions necessary to adapt to a changing climate. These conditions include geophysical conditions, settings, which are soil types, geologic types, microclimate conditions, their naturalness, and their connectivity. This data is developed for the entire United States by the Nature Conservancy. And fourth and finally is habitat connectivity. This is the newest addition to this model. We know mammals and other wildlife need room to roam to find food, water, shelter, and mates. Their survival depends upon large areas of suitable core habitat connected by natural movement corridors. And so protecting and maintaining those areas is paramount to their survival. To emphasize the wildlife connectivity, we considered large areas of natural habitat, which we called cores. Just imagine a very large forest, a large wetland complex, and then areas that link those corridors, very obvious, right? But they're often smaller, but still intact, thinner areas that are connecting those big blocks of habitat, those key corridors. And then natural habitat of regional importance for connectivity. And we took all 4 of those models. You can look at each one of those models separately on the conservation blueprint, but then we combined each one of those with the idea that if we're going to invest $1 into conservation, we want to achieve as many values with that dollar as possible. So we're looking for stacked benefits when we're protecting an acre of land. So we want to protect an acre of land that includes as many of these values on that acre of land as possible. Next slide, John. So I just wanted to run through very quickly a couple of things that I thought would be really, really interesting for this audience. So just to analyze a little bit of the data combined with this concept of the build out. So once we had our models completed, we did some analysis to better understand how many acres of land were still remaining to be preserved or developed, right? Because those are acres that are up for grabs. And these 4 following slides are a result of the work at the county level. So we lumped these statistics into 4 broad categories based on their estimated time horizon towards that build out window. So caveats galore on this. Please note these statistics are approximations. You know, when using land use, land cover data, even if it is the best available data, in most current is still old. This analysis used 2012 data. John did his analysis using 2015 data. Imagine there's a lot of development and a lot of preservation that's taken place between 2012 and to today. So please use these stats as reference, but not as gospel, please. All right. So these 3 counties are what I would consider have reached or quickly approaching that build out window: Hudson, Union, Essex County. And you can see the 2 categories are total acres available, and then the number of acres available in the top 2 ecological rankings in those models. So next slide. So these are the counties that are approaching build out within the next few decades, just based on development trends and preservation trends in each of these areas. So still some opportunity. Still, if you live in one of these counties, we should be racing to preserve as much of the lands in those top 2 ecological rankings as possible. Especially in Cape May is a bit of a surprise, right? There's been a lot of both development over the years and a lot of preservation efforts over the years. Next slide. These are counties that are approaching build out, but still lots of opportunity. Couple of surprises here: Middlesex County. Not being from Middlesex County, I thought it was much closer to the build out window than it is, but there's still quite a bit of land available there. You know, Somerset County, very similar, a lot of development in that area in the past. Monmouth County as well, along the shore. So the next slide, John. This is what I call lots of opportunities. These are the counties in New Jersey where there's still over 100,000 acres available. And there's a lot of, these include regulated acres. So we often look at available lands, regulated acres, removing them typically in some of our statistical analyses because they have a lower likelihood of being developed. So wetland buffers, et cetera. But this includes those wetland and wetland buffers and stream buffers. So Burlington County has the highest number of acres available, but Sussex County has the highest number of acres of highest quality. So that's what you should get from this. Again, don't use these statistics as gospel. Don't write down the number. Oh, there's 105,721. These numbers are not that today, because we've seen a lot of acres developed and preserved. Next slide, John. So our long-term project outcomes. When we originally set out on this journey for Conservation Blueprint, we had 3 clear elements we wanted to achieve. 1, we wanted to develop shared strategies and coordinate efforts to accelerate conservation work in priority areas. We wanted to get people focused, get ourselves focused on those highest priority ecological lands, community green space lands, and agricultural lands. 2, we wanted to create information that will be used to inform the next generation of planning and to use environmental and cultural data to make more informed land use decisions. And We wanted to develop an innovative and sophisticated mapping resource, which we have done with the expertise of Rowan University on this New Jersey Map 2 platform that is easy to use, regularly updated, and is being referenced in a high percentage of land preservation decisions at all levels. So now that we've seen the power of the data in the tool, our goals have evolved. We now would love to see all county and municipal preservation programs and environmental commissions using it. And we would love to see all township land use, zoning, planning boards referencing the blueprint in development decisions. We have seen that the biggest beneficiaries of blueprint have been found at the local levels. It is with the local environmental commissions and open space committees like yourselves that we've seen some of the most innovative uses of the blueprint. It is at this level that natural and cultural resource data is most needed, but is not often easy to get. As a member of my own environmental commission, I didn't have access to this information unless I asked my township engineer for it. So we often had to pay for it in order to get it. Now it's available to us live whenever we want it. And it's through outreach like this, we want to know that we've heard you. We've heard from people like you about the tool, and it's informed the development of the blueprint from the very beginning. And we want to continue to hear from you so that we can make the blueprint even more valuable and useful for your needs. And so now we're going to turn to our live case studies, and to give you a sense of how the blueprint data is being used, John and I will be giving you a couple of case studies. So John, I turn it to you to kick us off.
Okay, so I am going to just give you a taste. It's like a wine tasting here, right? My wife brought me to a nice winery down here for the first time that I went to, and they give you a whole variety of wine tasting, but just a tiny little bit in each flavor here. That's what I'm going to try to do. So hopefully you're going to absorb this. One of the things that we really try to make be important for the conservation blueprint and for NJ Map overall is that we know that this is a tool that's not for the engineers and the experts, although they use this. What our idea is here is making the tool be something that works for the everyday user, the everyday environmental commission member, the active citizen. And so therefore it has to be usable, understandable without having a degree in GIS, geographic information systems. So that's one thing that I think we have some things that we do well that separates us from some other online mapping, but we also coordinate with other online mapping. So I'm going to show you my town. I've lived in Glassboro for 17 years. Glassboro is where Rowan University is. It's in the heart of Gloucester County. It's right on the edge of the suburban versus the rural. It's on the edge of the Pine Barrens. It's kind of like a nice case study. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of how you can use NJ Map as an environmental commission or commission person or anybody to just get a sense of the geography of your environment of your town. So I have in the slides these images linked. We'll see if they came through here. Where is my, here we go. So now that I'm using not a blueprint here. This one is the land use layer that, so first of all, when you come onto NJ Map or you come onto the conservation blueprint and you open up a map, you'll see this layout here. So we have the legend on the left. We have a toolbar on the very far left. You can tell what theme you're in by the label on the toolbar on the left. And now we're seeing when I click on the maps icon here, it's showing all of the layers that are available in NJ Map. The conservation blueprint is at the top. The blueprint has 5 different themes. 4 of them are the priority models that Eric talked about. So this is how you quickly navigate from one theme in NJ Map or in conservation blueprint to another. So right now we're in the land use, which is under natural resources. That's another NJ Map project. It has some natural resources in there. So that will be of some interest. There's a lot of overlap as well. You'll see some layers that are in multiple layers. But so right now I'm in land use. So we're seeing the land use of Glassboro. And so when I open up the legend for this layer, You can see the double arrows is open and close the legend. This is how you can get that to work. And I see layers that are checked on here. And I can see that I have my municipal and then my county boundaries, but this is how you turn things on and off by clicking on the checkbox. That's pretty intuitive. Whatever you click on to turn on is going to be the layer that's drawn on top. So if I turn on New Jersey river basins, for example, it's now covering other layers. And if I want something to be back on top, I would click on that again. So I can make my municipalities draw back on the top. I can have my sub watersheds drawn as well here. So what would I be doing here? I'm looking at Glassboro and I'm trying to get an idea of what are the watersheds that make up Glassboro. And so I can see I have Chestnut Branch, which is part of the Mantua Creek. I have Still Run, which runs into the Maurice River. I have Mantua Creek up in the northern part of Glassboro. So I'm getting a sense right now, and I have a little bit of Raccoon Creek to the west here. I now know my watershed. So that's one thing that if I was a new environmental commission member, I would want to get an idea of where are my streams, where are my rivers flowing, and so forth. So that's one thing that's important. Let me go back though to land use. So I'm going to turn land use, I'm going to double click on it, land use 2015. And I want to see what land use has changed in the last few years. So I'm going to turn on and turn off this land use change. And you see the yellow polygons? Those are polygons that change from being one land use to another land use. We can see, if you're familiar at all with Glassboro, there's been a whole downtown redevelopment, and this is called Rowan Boulevard. So my land use change polygons are kind of highlighting that. So that's one thing that you could get familiar with, was what is the land use of your town. We can see that for Glassboro, there's a very clear kind of pattern where we have the center city where Rowan is and the downtown. We have orange, which is like suburban residential. And then we have a lot of wetlands over in the eastern southern part of Glassboro. That's the Glassboro Wildlife Preserve there. And then we have some agricultural lands that we see in the tans that are on the periphery. Now, Glassboro is also a community that has a lot of different aspects to it. It has some urban areas, suburban areas, rural areas. It's like a nice representative of all of New Jersey, having those different types. But we also have a mix of racial and ethnic populations and incomes as well. So this is one area that I'm going to show you. I'm going to change my map here to one of the blueprint themes. Now see how I go on the map layer there. I want to bring up community green space. So I'm clicking on community green space by going to that map menu, and you'll see the screen stays in the same location and now draws a different theme. So you can go to any one of these maps of NJ Map, and mostly the blueprint we're talking about tonight, and every one you change to is going to stay in the same zoom in the same location that you're in. So that's another convention that I wanted to kind of give you an idea about. So let me bring back the legend here. This is the the community green space, where the colors that are showing are representing areas that might be high interest for creating additional open space opportunities. Maybe it's passive, maybe it's active recreation, maybe you're looking for ball fields, maybe you're looking to have a stream corridor preserved. And this map is showing the model that we have of what lands might make for better opportunities for conservation or for some kind of green space. Doesn't necessarily have to be open space preservation. It may be some other types of green space. And so it's interesting to see where it's already developed. There's not, there are opportunities for potential new conservation or environmental areas, but there are also areas that are just already developed, and so they already have some open space. So what we're going to look at here is to see what the component layers are, and so you can see how they fold down here. This is the convention of using NJ Map, that things are folded up, and the more you click on things, the more information you can get. You can click on even more and get information about how the models or how the layers or where the source of information is. Okay, so you're going to want to get familiar with how you find more information by doing that. And then you're going to see that we have a bunch of extra layers that we often put in reference layers down at the bottom. These aren't part of the model. And in fact, the model's good for a lot of conservation and environmental prioritization, you thinking about what's most important in your environment. Now, this is what the model says is most important for Glassborough's community green space, habitat for humans. But if we were going to switch to ecological, it's going to show a whole different set of priorities. And here we'll see it draw for the same exact location, right? It's bringing up the ecological priority model. And we could do the same thing for agriculture and so forth. And so that's how we change between layers. I'm going to go back to community green space for a minute here and just allow you to see where you're going to dig in and find some more stuff. So under reference layers down here on the left, lots of things that we can look at. We can look at, for example, residential units. We have them all mapped here. That's kind of a cool map to show where all the people actually live. We have things that we do where we show like the acres of green space that are available to within distances to those residential units. They're colored different colors. So for example, if you are a light color, you have 25 or less acres within a half-mile walk, or if you're darker green, you have more than that. So Glassborough has some areas that have not, it has open space, but maybe not large amounts of open space for the number of acres that would be within accessible distance to these housing units. So there's lots of things like that that you can play around with, that you can get information. Where are the floodplains? Where are the historic districts? And then finally, I think for getting to know your environment, and that's what this first case study is like. One of the real important things for the environment is certainly impervious surface and water quality. Now we have impervious surface in some of the conservation blueprint, but I'm going to go to another one of NJMAP's layers. We have stormwater management there, and that is one we're developing with New Jersey Future that shows a lot of important things for water quality. So I just, again, changed my NJMAP layer. This is, again, stuff that is, some of it's in conservation blueprint, but this is packaged a little bit differently. We have impervious surface, and you can see the percentage impervious surface by how dark it is purple. And then we also have FEMA flood zones, and we have the impervious footprints of buildings, roads, and parking lots. And all of this, when you click on any one particular area, depending on what layer you have, it's going to tell you how many acres of impervious surface are in the portion of the watershed that's in this part of Glassborough. So this is something to really help you get a sense of what is my water quality situation in my town. So I would encourage you on your own to go and look at this layer and get a sense of your watershed and your sense of how your hydrology works within your town. Okay, you can look at things like wetlands with buffers. We can turn that on as well. You get a sense of where the wetlands are in Glassborough. Now, again, I don't see the municipal boundaries. I'm going to come and find my boundary layer. I'm going to click on municipalities, and now I can see my outline of Glassborough just to remind me of where I am and what towns are nearby. I want to know what Pittman's doing. I want to know what Washington Township and Monroe Township. I want to see my geography compared to other neighboring towns and get a sense of my environment. Now, this is all open source. It's free. You can use it on your iPhone or an iPad live in meetings. These are some of the things that we really try to do with NJMAP and the Conservation Blueprint to make this be a usable tool for you in whatever your circumstances are, during a meeting, at home, as you're doing homework. Hopefully, I've given you a sense of some of the things you can do to learn about your town. I've just scratched the surface. I've given you a little wine tasting here. And when you go back and you look at the Google Slides, you're going to be able to click on the links and bring up some of these maps showing watersheds and so forth. Finally, the last thing I want to end with here, here we go, is to bring up the overburdened communities map. Now, I mentioned that Glassborough has a really interesting mix of population. and some of it is pretty segregated. And if you are in some parts of town, you might not know who some of your neighbors are. It's really quite interesting, and you might not know that there are people that are of different economic class because we don't mix. It's kind of one of the problems of New Jersey. We're a very segregated state because of home rule, but we're segregated in Glassboro as well. And there's a lot of great things that we do as a community that makes bridging across the different populations. But the DEP has come out with a overburdened communities mapping layer. And this is very, very interesting. We've just added this to many of the NJ map layers. And what this is showing is in the state, they've gone to census blocks and they've done an analysis of census blocks. And you can see this, many municipalities don't have overburdened communities. Glassboro does, but the color key here is low income and minority. Just low income is the tan color. The dark blue is low income, minority, and limited English. And so you can get a sense of some of the towns and some of the areas and census blocks where some of the communities that don't have the same capabilities for getting engaged in protecting their environment and often are at the mercy of environmental challenges. The state is really trying to focus that. We're one of the first states to have a diversity dimension, and so I'm very proud of that. But here you can see a little bit of that. We have that in NJ Map. And lastly, I'll just give one more piece of eye candy here. Everything happens at the parcel level, right? So we have all of New Jersey's parcels mapped. You can see under the boundary layer, I can turn on the parcel layer. And when the parcel layer is turned on, I can click on any particular parcel and get information for that parcel. If I want more information, I can click on Show in Parcel Explorer, and it will give you all kinds of information about that parcel. So I'm going to not spend any more time with this because I don't want to take any of Eric's time. Eric's got a case study that's directed right for environmental commissions. But here we can see that this parcel information is going to show the tax records. It's going to show whether it's in a sewer service area, what the measurements are, and so forth. And we can have that we have that for almost all the parcels in New Jersey. About 10% of them don't have a proper link, and so you'll get no data on them. But 90% is pretty darn good when you know that there's 3 million parcels in New Jersey. So I hope that this gave you a nice whetting of your appetite, a nice wine tasting, and with a purple map here that kind of reminds me of a nice glass of wine. So I encourage you to get engaged and try and play with this. I warn you that you might get lost and spend hours seeing all the different things that you can look about your community with this. But Eric is now going to give you a better sense of how he uses it in his environmental commission. I'm a professor. I like to work with students and with communities, but I don't do environmental commission things directly. And so he's much more qualified to give you an idea of how Conservation Blueprint can be really used for environmental commission work, which this workshop today is really focused on. So Eric, I'll let you take it over.
Fantastic. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I sit on my environmental commission in Andover Township, and there was a recent development application, as those of you who sit on environmental commissions know well, that was sent to our EC for a review and recommendations to our land use board. And so I'm going to share with you our process of using the Conservation Blueprint and its powerful data to help us in our review of this application. And when you don't know a property, as an EC, you have to begin gathering data to start assembling a puzzle, right? It's like little discrete pieces. And how do you make a pattern out of all of these pieces in order to make an informed report to your land use, zoning, or planning board, right? And so this is a puzzle that we are solving right now. And I want to note that this is a pending application, so I don't actually have any results to share as to what's going to happen with our report. So I'll just step you through how we've done it, and hopefully you can find some utility out of this and begin to use it in your community. So as John mentioned, the parcel data, that's first things first. I've got to find where the property is. All right, so this is the property right here in the middle of my screen. You can see it's an old airport. It's a runway here. So I just want to orient you to a couple of things. There's a big pond to the northeast corner of the property. And so this is the property in question. So that's first things first. Second point that I like to do is I like to turn on the preserved lands information, open space and preserved farms. So you could see this property in context to other preserved lands in the area, just to see what's the impact if this development goes through. Is it going to fragment a big area that we should be preserving, and maybe looking for alternatives? All right, second thing, we like to look at, we wanted to know if the project would potentially impact lakes, rivers, or streams. So I go to this New Jersey hydrography data layer, right? And you can see here, it identifies water bodies and rivers in New Jersey. This is in the reference layers. And when you click all of these different things on, it'll give you the names of stuff. So, oh, I don't want to turn that one on yet. So this is the Pequest watershed. So this is the property in question again. You can see there's a stream, there's the big pond to the northeast, and there's a stream that runs along. It's a tributary to the Pequest River. All right. I also now wanted to see, are there any Category 1 streams that this development was going to impact? And lo and behold, there's a Category 1 stream. For those of you, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Category 1, but this is a designation that the NJDEP has recently updated. So this is, again, the most up-to-date version. And you see, as John mentioned earlier, the nomenclature, the more you click the down arrows, and you can get more and more information. So this was updated as of spring 2020. So this is really interesting. All right, so this has the potential to impact the Category 1 stream. So I wanted to begin looking at other water quality features. So this is where I went up to the different models, and I started clicking on and off. We started clicking on and off. All right, so headwaters, the origins of our streams. It's where a lot of our habitats are draining into. So look at this. A lot of this area is delineated as headwaters habitat. So that's good to know. If you develop this area, you're going to be impacting the hydrology into the stream. Started looking at the active river areas, which is another word for ecological floodplains. So the Nature Conservancy created this data layer. These are not the regulated floodplains that you would have, like, say, FEMA. This is what we consider the floodplain areas that we've mapped using this methodology that contribute either land, water, sediment to our streams and rivers. So we feel like this is a better scientific definition of floodplains than the governmental definition of it. I also wanted to look at the wetlands. As you can see here, this is again the property in question. There's a little bit of wetlands popping up here. So that was really interesting. What is that? And then here in the habitat for rare species, we have vernal pools. So I click on that, and lo and behold, there's a big vernal pool habitat right in this area. And these are buffers. All right, this is known vernal pond habitat. So we've got two categories based on New Jersey DEP: vernal pool habitat area and then potential unknown. For those of you who've ever worked with this data, this is classic. Sometimes we suspect there's vernal pool, but you can't get access to private lands to verify it. You just call it potential. So this gave us a really good indication that this proposed development could have impacts on water. So we gathered these pieces of data and we started assembling a report noting the impacts that we assumed would occur to these water quality elements. So second, we wanted to understand how this proposed development would impact rare species habitat. So going to this model here, so habitat for rare species model, we first looked at the natural heritage priority sites. So these are sites that the state of New Jersey and the Natural Heritage Program maintains that delineates known habitat for species, that the trust species that the state of New Jersey has deemed important. So again, this is the property in question right here. So this is not a natural heritage priority site, but there are a lot of natural heritage priority sites in the vicinity. So, but this is not in one. So we then wanted to look at the habitat connectivity. So this is a data set, if you're not familiar with it, so connecting habitats across New Jersey. This is another NJDEP, the Endangered Non-Game Species Program, created this model called Connecting Habitats Across New Jersey, acronym is CHANGE, to identify cores of habitat, which I mentioned earlier. So you click on the cores and you can see, here's the property again, and portion of the property is in a core. That's important, but it's not the majority of the property. Then we look at the corridors and look at this. So these are corridors. These are known pathways, potential pathways for species to move. It's the most efficient pathway, identified pathway for species to move when they're migrating for whatever need. It could be impacts of climate change, could just be fulfilling whatever their life cycle needs are. Okay, so this property has significance to impact both of those qualities. Okay, all right, so I saved the best for last. So the third and final thing that we looked at here in the rare species is the landscape projects. For those of you who are veterans at looking at these applications, landscape is the best available data that New Jersey has for state and federal T&E species. All right, so we looked at the project rank. Okay, look at this. So again, here's the property, here's the legend, and we're looking at dark green is federally listed species on this property. That's really interesting to us. So as John mentioned, you have, when you have the parcels on and you do a little right click, like I'm doing here, it'll bring up a whole bunch of different options. We know Blueprint is not going to be able to fulfill everyone's need at every single moment, nor do we expect it to. So you do this right click, and here are these other options for maps that you can pull up. So again, for those of you veterans who are used to looking at this data for environmental applications, you know NJ GeoWeb. All right, so I'm going to go to New Jersey GeoWeb and hope it's not slow in order to show you how we went deeper. All right, so here's the property, right? Remember the landing strip for the planes. Here's the pond, right? So here's the property in question. Let me move these guys out of the way. So the way NJ GeoWeb goes, you're looking at the layer list. All right, so you're going down. This is just more information. You go to landscape. Okay, so one of the things I went to is, all right, so let me look at just to verify the vernal pond habitat. All right, so there you go. You're clicking on and off. This is the vernal pond. So in fact, the majority of this property has vernal pool habitat on it. So that's a good indication. We are in the Skylands region. So I click on this. And again, you can see here's the menu or the choices here, federally listed species ranked on this property. And if you've never seen this feature, I was very excited about this. If you click on a polygon in NJ GeoWeb, this little feature pops up, this little menu. So I clicked on the property. It will tell you all of the species, why this property is ranked, whatever the ranking is. So we determined this is barred owl, it's breeding sighting, worm-eating warbler, Indiana bat. This is your federal T&E species, the Indiana bat. It's active season sighting. It's a maternal colony. It's a roosting site. You got bobcat, you have long-eared owl, you have Jefferson salamander. This was the information that we needed in order to make an informed report to our land use board. So this confirmation about the species habitat, the T&E species habitat, coupled with our assessments of the impacts on water resources, formed the backbone of the EC report on this project to our land use board. And so you have to stay tuned for the results of that report, because as I mentioned, it is a pending application. And so I will mention, because I know we're running into time and we want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A, the Chatham Township has also used that same methodology in 2020 to steer development away from a ecologically sensitive area into an area in their town center. And they then use the conservation blueprint to adequately encourage the town to preserve those sites. So they preserved the sites back in 2020. So it's very exciting to see communities use the data to make smart, because they got the development. They still got the 64 multifamily housing complex, but it was in a smarter place near their town center. And they also preserved the environmentally sensitive. To me, and I think John, to speak for John as well, that to me is the win-win. This tool is not to say no to development, it's to say yes to preservation, and let's make wiser land use decisions using this data. So with that, John, I don't know if you have any summary wrap-up comments you wanna cover. That's it for me.
Well, I'm just taking a look at the chat here, and there's a question about how you capture the maps and the data in the Environmental Commission report, and that's a good point. Maybe the blueprint as a tool is maybe different than the report that you produce, and so that's a good question. How do you do that?
Yeah, I would take screenshots. If you're in Google Chrome, you just do a screenshot, and we copied and pasted. I've seen people drop that information into a PowerPoint, or you could just drop it into Word. That's how you do it, and you sort of build the sequence of stories that way. Honestly, we've done it live. We've done it live with the Environmental Commission, and we presented some of this information in the past to the Land Use Board.
Okay, great. Well, Eric, that was really, I think, very informative of how you took a specific case and you showed the different ways that you would look for information that can help the Environmental Commission really have an informed response to whatever's being proposed. And so every town's going to have their own projects come in and their own things that need to be reviewed. But I think you give a really good sense. I would just now maybe open up. Are there any other questions that anybody wants to put in the chat? We maybe have a few minutes to answer some questions. We can do that.
Yeah, there's a few questions that came in a little earlier, and I'll ask them now. One of the questions was, is there a map that shows how much, if any, land remains in control of Native Americans? I don't know if you've even considered that or looked at that at all, but.
Well, that's an interesting question. We don't have one that we have made specifically for that, but a lot of things that you have a question like that, you can put two different map layers on and see that. So what we are, we have a remaining available lands map, and then if we were to put on the Native American lands in New Jersey, which is available, maybe I can try and show that. We'll try and do it live here. I'll see if I can make this happen. Let's see. Okay, so for a question like that, what would I do here? I would go to the Conservation Blueprint overview, because I know that in Conservation Blueprint overview, oh no, let me revise my situation here. Conservation Blueprint overview is an interesting. This shows the different participants in Blueprint and where they're active, which might be helpful for you as Environmental Commission. But how I would answer that is to bring up the two different layers. One, it would be remaining available lands, which we have under open space and regulated land. This is actually going to be moved to the Conservation Blueprint set of maps. This is in development, we have a map theme that is trying to document all the different sources of known open space. And it also shows that remaining land. So here it is. Everything that's purple is in our model. It's not developed. It's not protected. It's not a wetlands buffer. It's not a steep slope. It's potential for either development or preservation. And so that's the purple map, whereas the green are things that are in our open space model. But under this, under component layers, I know that I have my PAD US, I believe, has some Native American category here. This is like the USGS open space layer for the state. And do I remember that correctly? Is there any Native American Indian lands? Okay, so it's showing it as this yellow outline. Let me turn off my other layers that are sort of confusing the issue here. And let me turn off somewhere I have watershed boundaries on, which almost looks the same. I think it's under reference here. So I'm turning off all my layers, and I want to turn on this PAD US and see if I can find the American Indian lands as a hollow outline. Might be helpful for me to change backgrounds here actually to say something more subtle like Google Terrain. See if we can find. Okay, so we have down in Cumberland County here. So this is being mapped. I don't know the source of the mapping other than it's USGS, but it is the Lenni Lenape lands that are designated here. And so I can take that map, I can kind of toggle it on and off. I can see that outline there, and then I can go back and turn on my my remaining lands layer. Okay, and I can get a sense. So yeah, so there's a lot of unprotected land that is in that area that's coming out as Lenni Lenape. So this is how you can answer the questions by getting familiar with the different layers, even though that might not be a model that we created as a specific layer showing that. And so hopefully that answers that question or gives you a sense of how you can use different layers that you might know and become familiar with to answer some of these deeper questions. So
yeah, the other question came is like our soil types map focusing on protecting farmland, and I'm sure that answer that question is probably yes, but
so under farmland, under the agricultural priority model of conservation blueprint, that's one of the important layers that we have mapped is the prime farm soils, and that's a classification of all soils as the different categories of farmland. So this is, we haven't looked at agricultural priority anymore, but let me turn on the component layers because that's where the farm soils are. And you can see under farm soils, it breaks it into 3 categories: prime farm soils, state important farm soils, and unique or local farm soils. Now we are developing in our natural resource layer, which is down here. We're going to have under land resources the full USGS NRCS soils data. That's not up yet, but that will have more distinguished soils. It's the same sources as we were seeing here, but this is just breaking it down into prime farm soils. So that's what we have available now is the prime farm soils, and that's really, really helpful. But stay tuned for even better soils information that we're working on. Okay. All right, so I will say here, as we're starting to push our time, a few things I just wanted to leave you with as, you know, hopefully we're like bring you to the swimming pool and push you in the deep end and you'll start swimming, hopefully, at least be able to tread water. But any of the themes that you're in, you can get often more information by clicking on some of the titles. Like, for example, the Conservation Blueprint Collection. If we click here, I'm going to right click and say open in a new tab so I don't lose this current tab. But what this will do is bring up the New Jersey Conservation landing page. And there's a real nice video that is a good overview that you can view. And then there's also a lot of tutorials that we are developing to show you how to just do regular navigation, some of the stuff that I showed you today, how to use map controls and so forth. That's over here under the question mark. And then if you want to provide some feedback, we love feedback. We really try to answer questions and we try to bring in your ideas. This what you're seeing is really a lot of users' ideas being manifest over the years. So please click on that button and give us your comments, your feedback, your ideas, your questions, and we try our best to get back to you and to take your ideas and bring them into the fold here. So those are two things I really wanted to point out. If you want to print, you can click on the print button. You can also, some of the layers you can download. Ones that we produce that aren't in existence, or we're not going to curate other people's data, but some of the things like our models, the conservation blueprint models, you can download directly from the menu. And then one last thing, let's say that you are zoomed into an area, you have farm soils on, you have other things that you're interested in my reference layers here. Maybe I'm going to put on open space and DWI cluster areas. I'm just making stuff up here, but I really like my map. I really like the map the way that it is. I want to turn on parcels. All right, so I'm really happy with my map, and I want to save this. I want to send it to somebody else. I want to somehow get back to this map. You can click on this share button, and the share button will allow you to copy a link that will reproduce the map. So I just copied it, and I'll show you how this works. Like, say somebody emails this to you, and you get this URL, and you put it in your browser. It's going to reproduce the map at that same location with the same layers turned on. It's how in the Google Slides, those links are, I use this function. I copied the links that will reproduce the map that is on the screen. That's a very powerful function for keeping your own notes and for sharing with other people. Instead of just trying to describe or figure out where the heck you are in New Jersey, you can share the map and it reproduces what you have on the screen in that way. So let me see, are there any other questions that have come in?
Yeah, I think there's a few left in the chat, but I will give them to you so maybe you can answer them to the people offline. But we are getting close to time. I know we just kind of, it was just the tip of the iceberg here. It was a lot of information given to us, and I can vouch for the fact that once you open up these maps, you will get lost in them, and like, you'll look at your watch and it's like, oh my God, where'd that hour just go to? Because you just start looking at all kinds of different layers and information, because it's just so much there. It's really a absolutely powerful tool for environmental commissioners, for land use board members. There's a lot of information there, and it's really hard to grasp it all. And I'm sure that there's people that would like to delve a little bit deeper into this, and maybe we can set up some sort of deeper training into specifics if people are interested in it at some other time, a later date. That would be great. I want to thank you, John and Eric.
Thank you, guys. This was wonderful.
And everybody that joined tonight. That was really amazing. It really was. Yeah. A good overview of things and a good beginning of a detailed analysis of the case study. That was really useful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. And out of all of our kind of user groups that we have presented to, I think this is a great match for environmental commissioners. And we hope that this helps you do your job better. And we hope that we hear from you about how we can make it better for environmental commissions. And definitely, let's do some more specific workshops that are focusing on one thing. This was an overview, but we could really do some nice deep dives on particular topics of people's interests. So yeah, we would love to come back and do some more.
That's
Agreed.
great.
And if you use it, please let us know. We love hearing case studies. Thank you.
Really terrific. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And we will be sending out the recording, and we'll send out any other resources that John and Eric have to share with us. We'll send you links. It usually takes us a day or two to get those together, so be patient. But we want to thank everybody for spending a summer evening with us, and happy 4th of July, everybody. Enjoy your holiday weekend. And John and Eric, thank you so much for your time. It really was so helpful to environmental commissions as they're working in the local level. This is really going to be really good for them to start playing with. So thank you.
Terrific. Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Good evening.